Well, ain't this a nice start to the morning? Hello, we have a new ban list. It's 25.12. Not to bury the lead, I have things to say about this one, hence why it's a deck and not just me staring at a web page. But I want to be clear, I do like this ban list. I'm going to have some critique of it, or some notes in general, but overall, I do think that these are good changes. Just not necessarily a huge fan of some of the other stuff attached to it, but it's overall positive. Matryoshka's gone, which is like simultaneously kind of necessary and kind of strange, right? This card had a really weird rise where it was like kind of a joke, but we all love the flavor of it, to becoming like the one card breaker suite that was just a problem all across the board. It's honestly really strange, the journey this thing has taken. I think that banning Matry is an acknowledgement that the current state of breakers and breaking is not great. It's hard to play real breakers for runners right now, and Matryoshka was a bandage for that. This is not a solution to the problem. Banning it is correct, I would argue. I do think that Matryoshka has to go. You should not be able to assemble a functional, unilaterally functional, like, rig for 3 credits and some clicks. Like, that's not okay. And I don't necessarily look, as much as I love hitting transfers, I don't like Matry hit transfer go, right? Like that's a little too effective. But this does feel like, hey, breaking isn't good right now. It's in a rough spot. Much like Bankar, this is further proof that the gear check penalty ice, like Samak and Hammer, were not doing their jobs. I don't have a lot else to say there. They didn't matter. Like, they weren't doing enough, and they still weren't doing enough at Worlds and what have you, and sure enough, here we are. I think we just need a moratorium on unrestricted break conditions on AI stuff. I think AI breakers are fine. Like, there are a lot of other niche AI breakers that are pretty okay. Stuff like Slap Vandal is very fair, almost, too fair. Audrey is kind of right on the line of acceptability, I would say. Like, Audrey did show up and do amazing things at Worlds. It has shown up and done amazing things all over the place, with or without all of the cards that it's lost along the way. And I'm a little nervous about that one too. I think we need to stop printing AI that can just break anything with very minor things holding it back. In the case of Matry, it was just how many you got. And eventually, in any matchup that wasn't Leo, that just didn't matter. So, we're here. Dolls saw their massive uptick in play in large part because runners can't reliably afford the time and resource costs of assembling a real breaker suite against this corp card pool. The game is so fast now. Unless you are playing against very specific things like Leo or RH, you are going to have to get rolling much quicker than previous metas. Now, that's not to say that there weren't decks that would end the game in, under 10 turns reliably, just to put a number out there. That number doesn't really mean anything, but just as a benchmark. Single-digit rounds, of play. Absolutely, fast advance has always been a thing. Decks that just operate to maximum efficiency and then, rocket off, go. But, there always had to be ways that the runner could get involved faster, and right now those are super limited, and the hardest part is not bankrupting yourself in the process, because money is tighter than it's been in a while. And Matryoshka was a very clear solution to that problem. Hey, my rig costs 3. That would do it, wouldn't it? Unfortunately, it came with the downside of completely disregarding subtypes, which are kind of important. The odd part of banning Matry is that it doesn't actually kill any runner IDs. I call out that Musliat in particular is especially sad. Musliat's a little bit in a weird spot at the moment. Dolls were the way to play her. And now you're back to regular breakers, but if you're back to regular breakers in Crim, it's really hard to not play Sable or to a lesser extent Zaya. Both of them are able to, say, bring tutors along, and the premier win condition in the game right now, which is twinning without it, being a non-bow with the ID. And Musliat is happy to do both of those things and still get value. But it does feel like you're playing a slightly worse Crim for minimal benefit. Other than that, right, you're dealing with various flavors of Anarch that ran Matry. They've got plenty of stuff. They're going to be just fine. And Shaper doesn't even care. Shaper's not going to miss Matryoshka one iota. There were a couple of cool decks floating around here and there that were in green and used this, but overall it's not really a big deal. On the corp side, though, this is actually pretty interesting. So one of the things that helped Leo rise to prominence was that a bunch of people were running Matryoshka, which says I can only break X amount of ice per turn, and Leo said, the hell you can. Other decks that sort of rose your stuff like RH, right, which would kind of kick you around a bit. What I care about here is that this makes Rush way more doable, and in particular, it makes Weyland Rush in IDs like Nuving and stuff, or Sviki also, way better. Way better. And that is right up my street. So I'm actually really happy as a corp player with this ban. Obviously, you know, oh, they banned a runner card, my corps feel stronger. Yeah, no kidding. But the ways in which Matryoshka was kind of molding ice around itself were really bad. And so this is exciting stuff. From a corp perspective, I think this is going to open the field a fair amount. It could also be really good. I didn't note this, but it could also be really good for wide corps that are thin on ice, like Poetry. I could see that being really interesting. So good stuff. I like what this is. This is going to help make ice matter a lot more. Though flavor-wise, this is a huge loss. I think Matry's cute. It's one of my favorite cards that they've printed flavor-wise. I love the way they gave everything different flavor text and all. I think it's super cool. So, bit of a downer. I think this is a net good for sure, but I'm, just like, oh, dang, that was a cool card. Now it's gone. One of my casual Netrunner friends, who's not in my local meta, but just a friend of mine, this is like one of his favorite cards, so to see this gone is a little bit sad. But anyway, moving on. This is a biggie. Okay. Put on the Sarah McLachlan, everybody. In the arms of the angel. Look, I've been playing False Lead in competitive metas for a decade. I have sentimental attachment to this card. I was doing, like, horrible things at regionals to people that were better than me and winning games I had no business winning off the direct impact of False Lead into horrible kill shit. I care about False Lead more than the average player, I think. And I still think this card had to go in this ban list, if not the last one. Honestly, it should have been gone before Worlds. I think the play patterns that False Lead enables are just awful. They've always been awful. They have never not been awful. And they're arguably more awful now than they've ever been. So yeah, good riddance. Yes, it deserved to die, and I hope it burns in hell. If the choice was False Lead or Oppo, False Lead was correct. God help us if we have to ban another NBN card. But I suspect Oppo is going to continue to be a constraint on design for NBN and tags in general. I'm working on a sort of overall NSG set review that kind of ranks them all. And spoilers, I think Liberation was really, really bad. I think that, like, the overall impact of the cards in that are either nil or meta shifting for the most part. And Oppo is one of those cards where, like, oh, this is absurdly powerful. This does way too much. Oppo is going to continue to constrain tag space because as long as kill exists, that's going to be a problem. And Oppo is going to continue to constrain runner deck building because they need an answer to Oppo. Now, that answer now can just be spend your whole turn. But again, this is the corp saying, all right, go spend your whole turn or burn your NFLs. And you're probably not going to see as many NFLs now that False Lead is not, forcing you to play them. But I still just, I have really mixed feelings about a lot of the stuff that came out then. False Lead going away is going to make Oppo feel survivable. I don't think it's necessarily going to make it feel any kind of good. I don't think this is going to force a lot of corps to change a lot, is the funny thing. I think Egg is just going to go back to Regenesis and be perfectly fine. I think that Nebula is going to continue to be dead and be a jank fast advanced deck at best. There's a handful of prison decks that were super fringe anyway that are just straight up dead. Almost nobody's going to miss that. They're not going to care. Like, the meta will be better for not having False Lead in it. I reiterate, I really would have liked to see this gone for Worlds. I think that having a Worlds defined by decks running False Lead in a lot of ways, not across the board, obviously, a lot of really cool stuff was getting played in general. I talked about that in my last video. But False Lead was a really big kind of warping presence across the whole pool. And so here I'm kind of like, all right, I'm glad it's gone, the evil is defeated, but will it actually, like, open up anything interesting for being gone? I don't necessarily think so. I think it's just going to mean that runners get to play fewer tech cards. but the tech cards they were playing weren't even bad. It was stuff like Wheels and No Free Lunch, and those are good cards. So I don't know. I rest in peace, my toxic fave. You were misery incarnate, and I'll see you again when I rotate to the Great Binder in the Sky. I truly, like, I will on some level miss False Lead. I just won't ever miss being on the runner side against it, and that's just a sign that the card had to go the entire time. We're not done, though. I have a question for the room here, and this isn't something that I've thought through, like, super well, so kind of go with me on this. I'd be curious to hear what people have to say in the comments. How do we feel about gray cards right now? Because I have thoughts, right? So I broadly like NSG's approach to the factions in terms of feeling consistent within themselves, but this is with the glaring exception of neutrals, which aren't really a faction, because they increasingly feel like bandage solutions to greater problems with the card pool. This is especially noticeable on corp side. You have no econ options in faction, you're fine. Here's Rego, here's off, here's petty cash, right? Like, this, obviously, Sure Gamble and Hedge Fund and all are going to exist, they need to exist. There are plenty of decks that actually omit either, but the fact of the matter is they built all of the econ you could ever need into the neutral pool, and then can just sort of point at that when they don't print econ in faction in any meaningful way. No agendas, same thing. Leo basically barely plays purple agendas that aren't luminal. You run Send a Message, you run off, you run Vuln on it. In-faction solutions can be, depending on the thing we're talking about, thin to non-existent. That feels really, really, really weird. I've never felt so reliant on gray cards to get going as I do right now. And I'm pretty sure this is the result of rotation going the way it did and elevation being what it is, but I have a note on that later, so we'll get there. IDs like Leo and Epiphany are kind of entirely held together by gray cards that are load-bearing, that were printed well before they existed. Leo, like I said, its entire agenda suite, with the exception of Luminal, is gray, right? There are versions that run ADT, but they are less common and generally less performant than just running 3 Send a Message, 3 Vuln Audit, and a Luminal. Epiphany entirely leans on B1001. Like, that card is the reason the prison can exist. It would function okay-ish without it, but, like, there is a reason Epiphany is able to do what it can do, and, like, Sideways HB can't, right? Like, it's not that those things are awful necessarily, but B1001 is, for some reason, neutral. I don't know why. There is, and it's critical. A lot of decks are kind of running into this weird thing right now where there is a neutral piece that is just holding them together, because without that, they would lack the thread to not just unravel on contact with a runner. I find this is generally less true of runners at the moment. There are options within the individual card pools to kind of supplement or handle problems. We're gonna get there. But Matry dominated the runner side for the last few months because it was cost-effective, right? Like, I mentioned that earlier. But it was also available. It was an option that didn't cost influence. So everyone but Shaper, rather, was perfectly happy to just save all that influence and turn it into win conditions, or supplementary power, or, more econ. Screw it. Shaper gained nothing for it, and therefore was really just kind of annoyed with dolls on the whole. And I think that the ways in which the neutral card pool have been shifting things are very evident across every single subtype. And both sides of the game. Oh, whoops, I duplicated that. Alright, whatever. Elevation only contained one especially good neutral, which was Petty Cash. And that kind of feels like an acknowledgement to me. Getting 5 whole neutrals across the whole set, if memory serves. The only other debatably playable one is Fly Swatter, and that's just because it's a code gate that says end the run. Like, the Purge is neat and all, but you can't really control it well enough to have it always be useful. If it kills a Fermenter, you're happy. If it kills a Botulus, you laugh. That's about it. Petty Cash is the big one, and I'm fine with having one big, really cool neutral card in there. But, like, who the hell is playing Side Hustle? Makota is a jank enabler, which I enjoy, but it's not, like, good. And then, what else are we doing exactly? Like, what is the purpose of neutral in the current pool? I genuinely don't think I understand what they're trying to accomplish with them. I remember seeing a note at one point, and I don't recall who said this, and I could be paraphrasing, but I swear I remember Seeing somebody over at NSG say that neutral cards on the whole should be a little bit less powerful because they're so available and accessible to everybody, or they need to come with inf cost. And I agree, but like, I don't think that bears out in the card pool in a meaningful way. And so I'll be curious to see what Vantage Point brings. Vantage Point can do a lot to bolster the solution pool within the factions, but I really want to strongly caution against continuing to print and reprint neutrals that serve as the backbone of their respective side of the table. False Lead was an entire win condition, practically, on its own, right? Matryoshka enabled everything. There was very little reason to not play it unless you were in Shaper and just couldn't reasonably get value out of it. Neutral cards like that are so impactful. Petty Cash is honestly a little bit scary. I think that Petty is one of those cards that very well could see a ban at some point, not because it's busted right now, but because the right combination of variables could just create such an oppressive game state that you then have to yet again take a look at the neutral pool and go, do we have to? And banning neutrals is especially rough because it impacts everybody. So I like this ban list. Again, I want to be 100% clear. I think this ban list was just straight up good. Even though I would have liked to see Falsely banned before Worlds. But I hope that this serves as like a cautionary, okay, we got to be really careful with Gray. Like, Gray needs to be useful, but it cannot be the means by which we solve problems, because if that card is ever good, it then lowers every single boat in the harbor the moment you have to take it away. Like, neutral is like where you have to be the most careful, most kind of conservative with power levels. And I'm hopeful that Vantage Point will continue that trend, or just continue to barely print neutrals and hand all the factions cool stuff. I'm completely okay with that too. Overall, yeah, good ban list. Thanks. Maybe next time an unban. I didn't want to dwell on that. I definitely think that, like, overall this is good. But I think an unban would have been a lot more experimental than what we actually got, which is just like, okay, yeah, take the two biggest neutrals from each side and get rid of them and see what happens. That feels a little bit better to me. Yeah, no, that's about it. This is good. Thanks for watching.